Hello and welcome back. In the last lesson, we set up our simple and silly counter with a teddy bear and the eggs, surprisingly. And in this lesson, we're going to kind of undo that and we're going to actually build out this Crave application. I will just mention that there is a ton of stuff that we're not going to cover about Vue.js in particular. I would highly recommend, if you do enjoy working with a reactive framework, the main things you want to focus on, or they kind of have it laid out in this sidebar over here. But computed properties and watchers, very useful. Class and style bindings are basically the method that you can use to bind classes. Just like in a lot of previous examples, we did classlist.add, classlist.remove. There's a method to do that using this vbind class thing inside of Vue components. You can also just bind class to like a template string or something. Lots of different ways to do that. Something that you'll definitely want to use is conditional rendering. So like you get these v-ifs, v-else that you'll definitely want to use it from time to time. And we're going to look into event handling and list rendering and form input binding. I think we're going to do that in our app. So we'll take a look at that. But there's lots of stuff here. Props are something we didn't look at that are really, really important. The whole idea of one-way data flow. And there's just so much stuff. And the good news is there's a lot of overflow and a lot of, or I guess I should say overlap with all reactive frameworks. They all pretty much have those same core features that I just mentioned that they kind of lay out in the guide on Vue.js.org. And if you learn one, it's really easy to pick up another framework that does this reactive stuff. So those are the main things. Take a look at all of those things. Props and one-way data flow are really important. We're not really going to get into that with our example because it's going to be a very flat component structure. We basically are just going to have one component to do our Crave list, if you will, our Crave to-do list. But it's definitely something you're going to want to get familiar with if you decide you want to use Vue.js in the future. And I think it's really definitely a good skill to have. Spend some time, go through this, play around with all the different features of Vue.js because it's just really a joy to work with, honestly, in my opinion. I think it's a lot of fun and it's really exciting to be able to do stuff like this and to build things so quickly and so easily. And I hope you agree. I hope you enjoy working with it as well. But that being said, let's just focus on what we need to do for our app. And I'll leave the rest of the stuff that surrounds Vue.js because it's probably a whole other course in and of itself up to you guys to take a look at. And what we're going to do is we're just going to focus on doing a little bit of state manipulation, messing around with our component so that we can get our Crave app working. And I think that'll get you guys started on the right path. And then later on, if you want to augment your Vue.js education, you can certainly go back and find the resources to do that. So let's go ahead and get started with this. We're going to take out, first of all, our whole cravings, or our egg counter rather, that we had in here, because that was really just meant to be some demonstration of some of those key principles there. And you'll see that just removes everything over here. And what we're going to do instead is in our state, first of all, in our data that is returned from this data method here, the most important piece of state for our Crave application is going to be a list of cravings. And in other words, it's going to be an array. And this could be any JavaScript value or expression that you may want to set. But in this case, I'm just going to say this is an array of strings. So, we're just going to have strings in here that represent our cravings at any given time. And so I may crave donuts. And let's drop in a donut there. I may crave strawberries. Let's put something healthy in there. And let's see if I can spell croissants. Croissant. You guys let me know if that's right or not. Wait, let me hover over this. I bet I have that. Yeah, Croiss. Hey, I think I did that. Look at me spelling French words. Cool. So we have our cravings, which as we add that in the Vue developer tools, you'll notice that is represented in our state right here. So you can see cravings, donut, strawberries, croissants, I guess I should say, because everything else is plural. And we want a way to represent that in the interface here. And we want to do that in a way that's going to make it adopt the Bulma styles. So what I think we're going to do in Bulma is let's go down to components here. And I'm going to use a component they have in Bulma called a panel. And this is what a panel looks like over here on the left. I think this will be a good one, a good component to use for us. And you'll see it basically consists of a outer div with a class of panel. We can have a panel heading and then a bunch of panel blocks. And then each panel block is basically, one row in the panel. So I think what we can do in this case is we will set an outer class of div class equals cravings panel. And we're going to use the, what is it called? The list rendering syntax in Vue, which you can see here. It's v4 equals. And then more specifically, we're going to use this syntax where we can also accept the index. And they also are going to talk down here about the key. Yeah, right here, vbind key equals right here. You're going to see the linter is going to yell at us if we don't do this step either. So I'm going to do all three of those things. But you'll see up here what basically we're going to do with list rendering and Vue, since we have an array down here, what I can do is I can say, let's create a div with a class of panel block, but I want to output that multiple times. So we're going to add v-4 equals, and this is a JavaScript expression that's basically setting up the loop. So how many times we're going to go over and recreate this div with a class of panel block. So what I'm going to do is do v4 equals craving, comma I, or the index in cravings. So for each craving in cravings, let's repeat this HTML div. And like I said, the linter really doesn't like it when I don't do this vbind key thing. So we need to make sure we do that. So I'm actually going to bump this down to multiple lines so we can see these attributes really clearly. And we'll do, you could either do vbind key equals I. That's one way to do it. Or I could simply just do the shorthand, which is colon key equals I. And in Vue.js, anytime you use colon and then an attribute, that basically means that the attribute over here is a JavaScript expression. So key equals this is a string, right? Because you can see it's green there. It is just like a normal HTML attribute, like a class that is a string value. But colon key equals is an expression. So I could put true in here. I could put a variable name, and that's the difference. So that vbind thing, or colon and then an attribute name, is basically binding an attribute or a prop. If you're using props inside of Vue.js, it's binding that to some JavaScript expression. So in this case, I'm binding it to I, or the index of the array item that we're iterating over. And now that we're iterating over each craving, I can come down here and I can just output the craving, like so. And check that out. Look, just like that, we created a list of cravings. And again, this is going to react based on state changes. So I could delete strawberries, for example, and Vue.js is going to automatically update the UI to reflect this cravings array at all times because it is reactive. And that is pretty awesome, right? Like, look how easy that was to just create a big list of items. And all we have to worry about, again, is our state, which is a very simple string array. So this is kind of the method we can use to build out what we can call a to-do app, if you will. And we'll give this a class of craving singular, just in case we need to tie onto that later in our CSS. I usually like to add a couple extra CSS classes when we can. And what I'm also going to want to do for our Crave app that we are building is I'm going to want to be able to add a new craving, right? That's definitely something we're going to want to do. So let's come down to the bottom of our cravings panel, and let's add a new div with a class of panel block. And within here, we're going to add an input. So I'm going to come over to Bulma's. They kind of have an example already of this search box right here. So I think that is just basically a control, panel class control. But I want to format this in a specific way. So let me actually come up here. I can use this one over here, this sidebar. Let's go to input. Is it on input? One of these has what are called add-ons. I want to get I think it's actually on general. Sorry, let me just find this. It's been a while since I've used this. Yeah, so just sort of like this style right here. I want to have sort of an, what they call a form add-on. So like an add-on button to the right, that'll be like a plus button or something. That'll be the button you click on to actually add it. And so we can basically just copy this, or I guess there's a copy button right there. And then we will paste that in here. So div class equals field has add-ons. And then there's our control right there, which is we can have a placeholder of what are you craving? And over here we have our button, which I actually want to be a button element. I don't like to use anchors for what is really just a button click. And then inside of that, I don't want search, but rather I want an icon. So let's jump into Font Awesome and I'll search for a plus. There's a nice plus icon we can use. Let's copy that. And Bulma actually has a special icon style. I think it's under Elements, Icon. So you'll see you just add span class equals icon, and then you can put your Font Awesome thing inside of that. So there's lots of different little utility classes around icons, but basically we can do span.icon. And then put our HTML inside of that. I want to make sure this is aria hidden equals true. And then we'll add an alternate span.sr only. Bulma does actually have an SR only utility class for screen reader content. And I could say add craving as screen reader text. So let's see what that looks like. So that's looking pretty good. But I want this to fill the width. And I'm pretty sure on Bulma with our inputs, on general here, when we had our add-ons, form add-ons right over here, there's one down here. Yep, you can see the is expanded modifier. So let's add is expanded, and that goes on the control itself. So we'll add is expanded right here. And I think because we're in a panel block, I'm going to need to do is block to actually get that to spread out like there, like it is there. So we'll do on the panel block is block. And that's just because it's panel block is flexbox by default. So if we use this is block thing, it sets it back. You can see it crossed out display flex, and it's setting it back to display block. Somewhere it's setting it back to that. And that fixes that issue. So as of now, this doesn't do anything, right? You can fill it out, you can hit enter, you can click on this button, it's not gonna do anything. So that's where we need to actually wire this up inside of Vue to, first of all, we need to do what's called input binding on this input to actually bind the input's value to a state variable. So let me show you what that looks like. We are going to go down to our state here where we have cravings. I'll also add a new string variable called new craving, which is going to initially be an empty value. And then once you have a state variable that is going to contain kind of your string for that input, if you will, up here on the input itself, what we can do is, again, I'm going to kind of bump these attributes down to multiple lines so it's a little bit easier to see. But we can add v-model equals new craving. And this is a really, really easy way to do what's called input binding. So you'll notice now in our cravings, we have this new craving value. And then check this out. As I type into the input box, it's updating the state variable down here. I didn't have to do event listening to like listen to the change event of this or the on key down to get the new value. This input binding is handling it automatically. And again, like everything else in a reactive framework, it's two-way. So if I were to also update the state from some method or some function and say the new value is something else and hit enter, you'll see it updates the input value. So I have bound this input so it's always going to equal this state thing down here, which is pretty cool because now I can basically say, okay, when you click on the plus button, then go and get our new craving state variable, our state property, and then let's add to the cravings array this new value. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So inside of cravings, let's come down here, and in our methods, we will create an add method. And the add method will take this.cravings.push this.new craving. And we should probably check to make sure this is actually has a value. So we can say if this dot new craving dot length is falsy, meaning it's 0, then let's simply return. So that's a super simple method, right? So we created this add method, and now up here on our button, I could do @click equals add, just like that. And now when I add something new like pizza, and then we select our pizza emoji and I click on the plus, you'll see it actually added that to our list. And sure enough, our cravings array has been updated. And just like that, check this out. I can add 1, add 2, add 3, and it's just updating our array every single time we do that, which is pretty cool. So it's a little bit weird that when you add something and then you click on the plus, it stays in the text box. So let's also, in this add method, let's set this dot new craving back to an empty string. And that's all you have to do to reset that. And now when I add pizza and I click on plus, it sets it back to an empty string. Great. So let's add keyboard support, because right now when I type in something, I hit enter, I would expect that to add it up here and kind of like do the same thing as clicking on this button. And building before, you know exactly how difficult it is to kind of add keyboard support to stuff. But check out how easy this is going to be. On the input up here, I can simply do @keydown.enter equals. So on the keydown enter key, add. That's it. Like, how easy is that? And then check this out. Pizza, burritos, I hit, I need to refresh. Hot reloading is not always working for me. But let's see, I'm gonna hit enter. It's gonna add burritos, pizza, hello, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So just by adding this little line here, we're able to create an event listener for the enter key. And there's lots of different ways to do this on in Vue.js. There's these nice little aliases for things like escape. It actually might be ESC, I forget. There's tab, keydown.tab, keydown.enter. And then for other keys, you can do the key code. So I think enter is also 13. Actually, that might be the escape key. Let me look. Enter, yeah, it is 13. So I could also do keydown.13, and that's going to do the same thing, right? But I'll leave it as enter because that just looks so darn nice. And another thing you can do on these event listeners is they have little modifiers for them. So for example, if this whole thing was in a form, you would probably want to make sure you're preventing default on click, right, on that listener. Well, they have a modifier for that in your Vue template file that you can just add .prevent. So if you want to prevent default, you just say .prevent. You could do the same thing on keydown. I could say keydown.enter.prevent. So there's lots of different ways you can do that. I don't need to do that on the input because I don't think an input does anything on enter. Well, maybe it does if it's in a form. So let's just add .prevent to that as well. And then we come over here and it's going to do all the same stuff. But again, we are actually preventing default in that case. So pretty cool. Hopefully you can see just how fast and easy we are creating this functionality using Vue.js, using Bulma and Font Awesome to stick in our icons. And we're just doing this stuff so quickly. I think it's going to be pretty fun. Let me actually change the button to primary. I guess a little teal color in there. That looks good. All right, so this is working pretty well so far. And I think the only other thing we need to do to complete this app is to add a button that'll basically allow us to mark a craving as, hey, I ate it, we're all done. So let's go ahead and inside of our v4 where we're outputting each craving, I'm gonna use a Bulma thing that I use all the time called a level. So we're gonna do div.level, and then this is gonna be div.level left. So we'll have a level left and a div.level item dot, and I'll actually want this to have also a class of craving label maybe. There we go. And then we'll put the craving inside of that. And then we'll have a div with a level right, and we'll have div.level item. And then this will have a class of craving actions. And then within here, we'll put a button. So we'll do button.is outlined, maybe. Oh, I want to make this small, so let's do is small. And on that button, let's put a little food icon, maybe. Let's go back here. Search for food. Utensils. I like that one. That one looks good. So we will copy this. We will put in, again, our span.icon. And let's do is small on this. We'll paste in that and make sure we set aria hidden equals true. And hopefully this kind of demonstrates just how fast we're able to do that. But and we'll also do span.action label, maybe. And then we'll just put in, I don't know, nom nom. And so it adds a nom nom thing. And again, because technically a panel block is flexbox, we'll want to add is block onto that to actually get our level to spread out. So now we have a nom nom button for each one of our cravings that we have here. And what I want to do is I want to say when you click on nom nom, it's going to go ahead and delete that. So that's pretty easy. Let's create another method to handle remove. This will accept an index or an array index, and then it'll basically just say this.cravings.splice, and splice will remove an element from the specified index. So if we start at I and remove one element, it's going to update the this.cravings array, just like that. And so now we have this remove element that accepts an I or an index parameter. So we have the I value because we're capturing it in the v4 up here. And now in our button, let's just make sure we do at click.prevent equals remove I. So let's make sure this works. You click on that and it removes the specified element. Pretty cool, right? So now we can add new things. We can remove them. And we now have pretty much a fully working app. Like, how quick and easy was it to build this out? This only took a handful of minutes, even with me explaining it. And you'll find that building things in reactive frameworks like this really does, number one, reduce a lot of the code you have to write. Like, I did this pretty complex app, or what I would consider a fairly complex app, and just these two very simple methods, and a bit of HTML. That's in part because we're using Bulma. My one criticism of UI frameworks that you don't write yourself is they tend to create extra HTML, like this whole level left, level item thing. That's kind of ridiculous, but it's just what you have to deal with, depending on how you want to develop. You certainly don't have to use something like Bulma. You could roll your own UI, if you will, but it's totally up to you how you want to do that. I kind of feel bad that we didn't add anything to our style sheet, so maybe we'll do something with that. Let's take our action label and maybe just to clean this up a little bit, let's come in here and we'll add, let's see, what is this? Craving actions. So we'll add actions.craving actions.action label to be width 0 overflow hidden. So let me kind of set that so it's hidden. And so it's just a smaller button. And then what we can do is when you hover over a button, I guess, dot button hover, and then you have an action label. Then we'll set the width to, let's see what we can set it to. So we have action label. Let's do like 5 ems, 4 ems, 5 ems. 5 ems looks about right. 5 ems. So it kind of pops out, and then we'll just set a transition on it. Transition width, 0.3 seconds ease. Like so. Whoops, missed a semicolon there. And then now we just get a little pop-out button. There we at least added some styles. We had to do something over here, right? And I think that's going to complete our app. Just like that, we have created our Crave application that allows us to track all the things that we may be craving at any given time. I'm a big fan of chips. Oh, they don't have chips. We'll put in a chipmunk. That sounds good. So you can see here, I now have my craving app. And although this is a really simple sort of to-do app, we don't have the ability to edit or reorder. You could do all that stuff so easily using Vue.js. It's basically like the rest of this course all the things that we did, the crazy like mouse down, drag over, all that stuff is available. And Vue.js, the actual event listening is so much easier because you can do stuff like at drag start equals, and then you have some method on this component that does that. It's all like a faster workflow. It's the exact same thing that we were doing before. It just, the workflow has changed, and all the stuff where you have to update the DOM is kind of offloaded into the framework itself. So I think this is a great way to build stuff. It's a great way to build out your components. And like I mentioned, you don't have to be particular to one reactive framework. Angular, React, Vue.js, they all work in essentially the same way. And they call things differently. Like in Vue.js, they call it data. I kind of refuse to call it data because I think state makes more sense. Other than like the naming convention and the syntax, they have basically the same features. And there's a big ecosystem around both of those front-end frameworks, which are the two largest frameworks, I would say. And the ecosystem allows you to take it so much further than just what you see here. You can do stuff in both of those frameworks where you can like build native applications for desktops and mobile devices. You can do things in both of those frameworks where you can create full, very rich single page applications with routing and state management and just all kinds of awesome stuff that you would expect from a very robust development library. You have these things in these reactive frameworks, and it's a really enjoyable way to develop, in my opinion. So I hope you guys agree. I hope you had a lot of fun working with Vue.js. Definitely recommend you learn more about this, learn more about React, learn more about anything you want. And that's the key, right? About building web applications is it's always changing. There's always something new around the corner. There's always something to learn. And if you enjoy learning, it's really a great industry to be in. So stay tuned. We'll probably do maybe one more thing with this app before we wrap it up. Just want to make sure I keep my promises that I made to you guys. I remember at some point I said I was going to do an exit transition, so maybe we'll mess around with that in the next video. I don't know. We'll see what we do. We're basically done, but maybe we'll do a couple other things to just show you guys a couple tricks you can use in your own components that you're building. So stay tuned. We'll check that out in just a moment.